Ever notice how some people can go through the worst situations without showing a single emotion? They lose their job, their relationship ends, someone close to them passes away, and yet they appear completely calm on the outside. What's actually happening inside their minds? And is this really as healthy as it looks? Today, we're breaking down the psychology behind people who keep their feelings to themselves. The science behind this behavior is honestly shocking, and by the end of this video, the way someone might view emotional suppression will completely change. Before jumping in, think about this. There's actually a scientific name for what happens when emotions get pushed down repeatedly. It's called emotional suppression, and research shows it's linked to serious health problems, relationship issues, and even premature death. That might sound dramatic, but the studies back it up. And there's one physical symptom that almost everyone who suppresses emotions experiences, but most people don't realize what's causing it. More on that in a bit. So let's get into it. Number 1. The volcano effect. Here's the thing about bottling up emotions. When feelings get pushed down and ignored, they don't just disappear. Think of it like a volcano. On the surface, everything looks calm and peaceful, but underneath, pressure is building up. And what happens when a volcano reaches its breaking point? It erupts. People who suppress their emotions experience something similar. According to research from the American Psychological Association, chronic emotional suppression actually elevates stress hormone levels in the body. When someone constantly pushes feelings down, cortisol levels stay elevated, which weakens the immune system over time. But here's where it gets really interesting. Studies show that people who bottle up emotions don't just experience more stress, they actually become more aggressive. Research found that subjects who suppressed their reactions to disturbing content displayed significantly more aggression afterward compared to those who were allowed to express their emotions naturally. The volcano analogy is perfect here. Someone might appear calm and collected for days, weeks, or even months. Then one small thing happens, something that wouldn't normally be a big deal, and they completely lose it. They snap at a friend over nothing, have a breakdown in the middle of a grocery store, or explode in anger at a minor inconvenience. That's the eruption. The pressure that's been building finally finds a way out, and it's usually not pretty. But here's what's really unsettling. There's actually a way to tell if someone is about to reach their eruption point, and it has nothing to do with their emotional state. It's purely physical, and we'll get to that shortly. Number 2, the physical toll. This one is genuinely disturbing. Emotions don't just affect the mind, they affect the entire body. And when emotions get suppressed, the body pays the price in ways that seem almost impossible to believe. A study from the Harvard School of Public Health and the University of Rochester found something shocking. People who habitually bottled up their emotions had a 30% higher chance of premature death from all causes. Even more alarming, their risk of being diagnosed with cancer increased by 70%. Think about that for a second. 70%. Just from not expressing emotions. But it doesn't stop there. Another study followed 729 people over 12 years. The results were clear. 37 deaths were from cardiovascular issues and 34 were from cancer. The common factor? Emotional suppression. When emotions get pushed down, they manifest physically. People experience chronic headaches and migraines because the mental strain creates physical tension. Some develop digestive problems, stomach aches, or constant nausea. Others notice their muscles are always tense, especially in the neck, shoulders, and back. Ever wonder why someone gets a massage and suddenly starts crying? It's because stress and suppressed emotions literally get stored in the body. When that tension finally gets released, the emotions come flooding out. Here's a story that perfectly illustrates this. There was a case study of a 42-year-old executive who prided himself on never showing weakness at work. No matter what happened, failed projects, company layoffs, personal struggles, he maintained a perfectly calm exterior. Then one day during a routine physical exam, his doctor noticed something alarming. His resting heart rate was extremely elevated, his blood pressure was through the roof, and he had developed a stress-induced ulcer. The man was genuinely confused. He told the doctor he felt fine, that nothing was bothering him. But his body was screaming a different story. 6 months later, he had a heart attack. He was 42 years old. The mind and body are connected in ways that science is only beginning to fully understand. But one thing is clear, ignoring emotional pain creates physical pain. And there's one organ in particular that takes the biggest hit from emotional suppression. But it's probably not the one anyone would guess. Keep that in mind as we continue. Number 3, the relationship killer. Here's something that might hit close to home. Emotional suppression destroys relationships. Not slowly, not eventually. It actively damages the connections people have with others every single day. Think about it. When someone refuses to share how they're feeling, the people around them are left guessing. Their partner doesn't know if they're upset, their friends can't tell if something's wrong, and their family members feel shut out. According to research, emotional suppression prevents people from receiving what are called social emotional benefits. Things like sympathy, support, and the feeling of being understood. When someone hides their emotions, they're cutting themselves off from the very things that make relationships meaningful. But here's the twist. Even when someone successfully hides their emotions most of the time, small signs still leak through. A tight jaw, a forced smile, eyes that look distant. And when others notice these signs, they start to think the person is being dishonest or hiding something. Which, technically, they are. This creates a cycle. The person suppresses their emotions to avoid seeming weak or burdening others. But that suppression makes them seem distant and hard to connect with. So people stop reaching out, and then the person feels even more isolated, which makes them suppress even more. It's a downward spiral that's incredibly hard to break. But there's actually a specific type of relationship that suffers the most from emotional suppression, and it's not romantic relationships like most people think. We'll explore that surprising connection in just a moment. Number 4, the false strength. Society loves to praise people who keep it together during hard times. The person who doesn't cry at funerals, the employee who never complains, the friend who always says, "I'm fine," no matter what's happening. But here's the reality check. That's not strength. That's survival mode. According to psychological research, many people develop emotional suppression as a defense mechanism in childhood. If a child grows up in an environment where expressing emotions was met with criticism, punishment, or neglect, they learn to shut down. They learn that showing feelings is dangerous. As adults, this pattern continues. They tell themselves they're being strong, independent, or mature. But what they're actually doing is protecting themselves from a threat that no longer exists. Dr. Colleen Meelan, a psychologist specializing in emotional regulation, explains it clearly. People bottle up emotions because of a fear of vulnerability. They believe that expressing feelings will make them weak, rejected, or judged. So they keep everything locked away, convincing themselves it's for the best. Here's something to consider. Many of us have been that person at some point. Maybe it was during a difficult breakup, telling everyone, "I'm totally fine," while crying alone at night. Or after losing someone important, putting on a brave face at work while falling apart inside. The truth is, pretending to be okay when everything is falling apart doesn't make someone strong. It just makes them really good at lying. And the person they're lying to most? Themselves. But here's the thing about false strength. It only works until it doesn't. Eventually, the weight becomes too heavy to carry alone. And when it finally collapses, there's a specific pattern that almost everyone follows. A 3-stage breakdown that psychologists have documented repeatedly. But first, there's something even more concerning to understand. Number 5, the glass wall metaphor. Imagine someone living their entire life behind a wall of glass. They can see other people. They can watch them laugh, cry, celebrate, and grieve together, but they can't fully participate. They're separated by this invisible barrier that they've built themselves. That's what emotional suppression looks like from the inside. On one side of the glass wall, there's the rest of the world. Messy, emotional, vulnerable, but connected. On the other side, there's the person who suppresses their feelings. Safe, protected, but completely isolated. The really tragic part? They can reach out and touch the glass. They can see exactly what they're missing. But they've convinced themselves that the wall is protecting them, when really, it's a prison of their own making. And here's what makes this metaphor so accurate. Glass is see-through. Everyone on the outside can tell something is off. They can see the person is holding back, keeping distance, hiding something. but the person behind the glass thinks they're invisible, that their wall is working perfectly. Studies show that emotional suppression doesn't actually hide emotions as well as people think. Research participants who were asked to suppress their emotions believed they were successfully hiding their feelings. But observers could still detect signs of emotional distress in their facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. The glass wall isn't protection, it's isolation disguised as safety. But what's really fascinating is what happens to the brain when someone lives behind this wall for too long. The neurological changes are permanent in some cases, which brings us to our next point. Number 6, the memory problem. This one is fascinating. Emotional suppression actually affects memory and cognitive function in ways that most people never connect. Studies show that when someone actively tries to suppress their emotional response, it takes mental effort, a lot of mental effort. The brain has to work overtime to push feelings down while simultaneously trying to function normally. This creates what researchers call cognitive load. Basically, the brain becomes so busy managing emotions that it struggles with other tasks. People who suppress emotions have trouble concentrating, making decisions, and remembering information. One study found that subjects who suppressed their emotions during a task performed significantly worse than those who were allowed to express themselves naturally. Their memory was worse, their reaction times were slower, and they made more mistakes. Think about someone going through a breakup but refusing to acknowledge it. They're trying to work, socialize, and handle daily life while using massive amounts of mental energy to keep their feelings buried. It's no wonder they can't remember where they put their keys or what they were supposed to do that afternoon. The brain simply can't do everything at once. And here's the disturbing part. This cognitive decline doesn't always reverse itself once someone stops suppressing. In some documented cases, chronic emotional suppression actually rewires the brain's neural pathways, which leads us to an even darker reality about what happens next. Number 7, the lonely paradox. Here's something that sounds contradictory but makes perfect sense once it's explained. People who suppress their emotions often do it to protect their relationships. They don't want to burden others. They don't want to seem needy. They want to appear strong and capable. But this behavior actually makes them lonelier. Research shows that emotional suppression leads to feelings of isolation. When someone doesn't share what they're going through, they feel like nobody understands them. Which is true because they haven't let anyone in. This creates what psychologists call the lonely paradox. Someone surrounds themselves with people, has friends, has family, maybe even has a partner. But they still feel completely alone because nobody knows what's really happening inside. And here's the worst part. When someone finally does reach their breaking point and tries to open up, they often don't even know how. They've spent so long hiding their feelings that expressing them feels unnatural, uncomfortable, or even impossible. According to clinical observations, people who chronically suppress emotions sometimes develop what's called alexithymia. It's the inability to recognize or describe emotions. They literally lose touch with their own feelings to the point where they can't identify what they're experiencing. Someone asks them how they're feeling, and they genuinely don't know the answer. Remember earlier when we mentioned the relationship type that suffers most from emotional suppression? It's actually the relationship someone has with themselves. They become strangers to their own inner world. And this self-alienation creates a domino effect that impacts everything else in their life, especially their mental health, which takes a turn that many people never see coming. Number 8, the health crisis nobody talks about. Mental health gets a lot of attention these days, but there's one aspect that doesn't get discussed enough: emotional suppression as a risk factor for serious mental health conditions. Research from multiple studies shows clear links between bottling up emotions and mental health issues. Depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts show up more frequently in people who suppress their feelings. One particularly concerning study looked at adolescents between 14 and 19 years old. The findings were alarming. Those who habitually suppress their emotions were significantly more likely to experience both suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts. Another study focused on men with prostate cancer. Almost half showed signs of major depression. And the common factor? Emotional suppression. Men who bottled up their feelings experienced worse symptoms, including anger, guilt, and sleep problems. But it's not just depression. Anxiety disorders also connect to emotional suppression. When feelings don't get processed, they turn into worry, restlessness, and persistent unease. The mind knows something is wrong, even if the person refuses to acknowledge it. And then there's burnout. In workplace settings, people who push through emotional fatigue without addressing the underlying issues eventually hit a wall. They experience exhaustion, cynicism, reduced performance, and a complete loss of motivation. The scary part? Many of these people appear high-functioning right up until they crash. And that crash follows a predictable pattern that mental health professionals have documented extensively. But before someone reaches that point, their body starts sending warning signals, and there's one signal in particular that nobody should ignore. Number 9, the coping mechanism trap. When emotions become too overwhelming to handle, people look for ways to cope. Unfortunately, when someone doesn't process feelings in healthy ways, they often turn to unhealthy ones. Research shows a clear pattern. People who suppress emotions are more likely to develop problematic coping mechanisms. Alcohol abuse, substance use, overeating, or completely losing their appetite. There's even a phrase for it: eating your emotions away. Some people turn to food for comfort, using it to numb feelings they don't want to face. Others lose their appetite entirely, too stressed or sad to eat. The link between emotional suppression and addiction is particularly strong. Studies show that individuals who can't express their emotions are at higher risk for both alcohol and drug abuse. They're looking for anything to make the internal pressure go away, and in some cases the coping mechanisms turn self-harm, reckless behavior, or complete withdrawal from life. These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of someone drowning and not knowing how to ask for help. What's really insidious about these coping mechanisms is how they create a feedback loop. Someone suppresses emotions, which creates distress, which leads them to unhealthy coping, which creates more problems, which generates more emotions to suppress. Around and around it goes. But there's one coping mechanism that's particularly dangerous because it looks healthy on the surface, and we need to talk about what that is. Number 10, the control illusion. Here's something interesting about people who suppress emotions. Many of them do it because they believe it gives them control. They think that by managing their feelings, they're managing their life. But research shows the opposite is actually true. When someone suppresses emotions, they're not controlling them. They're letting the emotions control them from the shadows. Those feelings don't go away. They influence decisions, affect relationships, and shape behavior in ways the person doesn't even realize. Think about someone who's angry but refuses to acknowledge it. They might not yell or show obvious signs of anger, but that emotion still comes out. Maybe they become passive-aggressive. Maybe they withdraw from people. Maybe they make sarcastic comments or find subtle ways to punish others. The emotion is still there, still active, still affecting everything. It's just operating underground. Psychologists note that this false sense of control is one of the reasons emotional suppression is so hard to break. People genuinely believe they're handling things well. They see themselves as strong and capable because they're not giving in to their emotions. But true control doesn't come from suppression. It comes from understanding emotions, processing them, and choosing how to respond. That's actual emotional regulation. Suppression is just avoidance, and this illusion of control leads people down a dangerous path that eventually reaches an inevitable conclusion. Every person who suppresses their emotions hits this wall eventually, and what happens next is something that changes everything. Number 11, the breaking point. Every person who suppresses their emotions eventually reaches a breaking point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Research confirms what most people already know from experience. Emotions that get bottled up intensify over time. They don't fade. They don't weaken. They grow stronger. And when they finally come out, it's often in ways the person never intended. Some people have emotional outbursts. They explode in anger over something small. Some experience complete breakdowns. They find themselves crying uncontrollably and not knowing why. Others develop what's called emotional numbness. They feel disconnected from everything and everyone, like they're watching their own life from a distance. According to clinical observations, many people reach their breaking point and don't even recognize what's happening. They think they're just tired or stressed or going through a rough patch. They don't connect it to years of suppressed emotions finally demanding to be felt. Here's a real example that shows just how sudden this breaking point can be. A 35-year-old teacher, known for being incredibly calm and patient, had a complete breakdown in the middle of a regular Tuesday morning. Nothing particularly stressful had happened that day, but she found herself unable to stop crying, unable to get out of bed, unable to function. When she finally spoke with a therapist, it came out that she'd been suppressing grief from her father's death 3 years earlier, anxiety about her marriage, and stress from work, all while maintaining a perfect, everything is fine exterior. Her mind had finally said enough and shut down. It took her 8 months to recover. The human mind is incredibly resilient, but it's not invincible. Everyone has limits, and pushing emotions down repeatedly is like testing those limits every single day. But here's what nobody talks about. The breaking point isn't actually the worst part. What comes after the recovery process is where the real challenge begins, and that's where the path forward becomes crucial. Number 12, the path forward. Here's the good news. Emotional suppression is a learned behavior, which means it can be unlearned. Research shows that people can develop healthier ways of processing emotions at any point in their lives. It's never too late to change. The first step is recognition. Simply acknowledging that emotions are being suppressed is huge. Many people go their entire lives without realizing they're doing it. The second step is permission. Giving oneself permission to feel emotions without judgment. Sadness isn't weakness. Anger isn't wrong. Fear isn't shameful. Emotions are just information. They're signals from the mind and body about what's happening. The third step is expression. Finding healthy ways to let emotions out. This could be talking to someone trusted, writing in a journal, engaging in physical activity, or working with a therapist. Studies consistently show that even moderate exercise helps with emotional regulation. Something as simple as going for a run or doing yoga can help process difficult feelings. And therapy, particularly approaches that focus on emotional awareness and expression, can be life-changing for people who've spent years bottling everything up. The key is understanding that expressing emotions doesn't mean losing control. It means taking control back from the emotions that have been running the show from behind the scenes. There's something powerful about watching someone learn to express emotions after years of suppression. It's like watching someone take their first breath after being underwater. The relief is visible, physical, undeniable. The psychology of people who keep their feelings to themselves is complex, deeply rooted, and often misunderstood. What looks like strength on the surface is frequently a survival mechanism that comes with serious costs. The physical health consequences, the mental health risks, the relationship damage, and the cognitive effects all point to the same conclusion. Emotional suppression might feel safer in the moment, but long-term, it's one of the most harmful things someone can do to themselves. The people who seem the strongest, the ones who never break down, never complain, never show weakness, are often the ones carrying the heaviest burdens. And eventually, that weight becomes too much. Understanding this psychology isn't about judging people who suppress their emotions. It's about recognizing the pattern, understanding why it happens, and knowing that there are healthier paths forward. Because here's the truth that research makes crystal clear. Emotions don't go away when they're ignored. They just find other ways to make themselves known. If this resonated, subscribe for more psychology deep dives.